She said to me, "Mum, I'm going to be in the sun, doing page 3.
Amid an intense period filled with headlines, speculation and public scrutiny.
Katie Price's ex-boyfriend Dane Bowers has revealed the true reason behind their split. Speaking candidly, Dane admitted his insecurities about Katie's glamour modelling career caused tension.
Katie Price has taken a savage swipe at her son, Harvey's dad, Dwight Yorke. The last time he saw Harvey was in 2012.
Right, shall I push play? Here we go.
So this is going to be either a 2-part or a 4-part series. It is about the Katie Price Nothing to Hide documentary. In my last video I had people try to tell me that I'm basically the most vile person on the planet for having an opinion that is anything different to theirs on Katie. So I'm going to say it again. I am not here to agree with the rest of the internet. I am here as my own person with my own opinions. 2 things can be true at the same time. She can do disgusting things, but I can still be fond of her. Her as a person and the things that she's done are 2 different things. Yes, it says a lot about her as a character, but once you know the things that she's been through, I think it is a lot easier to understand why she is the way she is, not that it justifies it. So let's get into today's video. I've had to tie my hair up already because even though it's only 26 degrees in Leeds right now, it feels in my bedroom like it is 56. So everyone talks about Katie Price's messy marriages and the fact that she's been, engaged so many times and married so many times. But it's really interesting because the first episode of her documentary goes through the psychological reasons as to why she is the way she is, the things leading up to it, and the fact that all of this and the way she is basically stemming from a single rejection before she was even 22. I just want to say everything that I say in this video that isn't backed up by facts, evidence, is my own opinion, which I am entitled to, yeah? This documentary is available on Sky and Now TV. It is a 4-part documentary and they literally speak to every single person that has been involved in Katie Price's life over the last 30 years, which I find amazing because the amount of things that she's done, the amount of people that she's probably definitely hurt, and they still want to share their side of the story. I think it's really good. And I think it's necessary too. Who knows? My opinion might change on her at the end of watching this 4-part documentary. Admittedly, I've only watched the first episode, but that's because I want to break down each episode and to make sure that I'm not missing anything that I want to talk about. Interestingly, in the first episode, before even 2 minutes in, the documentary cuts to a part of Kerry Katona, which is one of Katie's best friends. It cuts to her giving some information surrounding what I presume is her wedding and drug taking. So I find that very interesting. And I have seen on the internet that Katie is not happy with what Kerry has said in the interview. So I am very intrigued to see what she says. But that aside, into the first episode. So the start of the first episode of this documentary is Katie going into her garage at her house, and it is just full of memories, full of things from when she was younger. Her page 3 days, she has a box full of like what she calls exes and surgery, medical records, things like that, horses, the magazines that she's been in, and from the very start you can see that she is both reminiscing but also it's like you can see her mind working as she's thinking about everything that's happened and could I have done things differently. And I think a lot of her guilt comes from her parenting and her exes and the way she treated them. And that is something that is obvious throughout the whole of the first episode. She picks up a few magazines and tells the camera crew that these photos are ugly. She said, "I look different in each magazine, but they're all ugly." And I think that is very interesting and is very telling about her mindset and the way she thinks about herself. She's very clearly not happy with the way she looks, and it's been that way since the early 2000s. She started off life being a very quiet and bubbly little girl. Her family, her mum and her brother specifically, have all said that she was so quiet. And it blows my mind because imagining Katie Price as somebody who was quiet as a child, I can't imagine it. I just can't. I feel like she's always had something in her where she's needed the attention. I feel like she craves the attention because she's so broken mentally and she needs the acceptance from other people. She says to the camera crew, "I look at these photos and I think, no, I don't look pretty." But if you look at photos of Katie Price from the early 2000s, similar to the way she looked on those magazines, she looks a million times better than she does now because she wasn't letting people's comments get to her and in turn needing that surgery or feeling she needed that surgery. She knew she was beautiful. She knew the camera loved her. She knew the world loved her. And it's interesting because it makes me think, is she looking at these magazines thinking genuinely that she looks ugly, or is that her trying to protect herself now by saying, I looked ugly then, so it don't matter what I look like now? And it's really sad to me because it's just another prime example about how people's comments, unwarranted, unsolicited comments, can have such a huge part to play on some people. And you know what? Straight away I'm going to say they should be ashamed of themselves. Anyone who's commenting on the way she looks, you should be ashamed of yourselves. What is that going to achieve? You're quick to comment about how she's not a great mum. She's got all these allegations against her. She's got a driving ban. 2 of her kids are in foster care. Yes, all that is true. But does it make you a better person for commenting on her appearance all the time and making her feel the need to have this surgery? The people who are commenting on her looks are the same people who are commenting saying, go deal with your kids, go look after your kids, where are your kids? But how about we stop attacking her looks so that she can be in the right headspace to be dealing with what she needs to deal with, fix what she needs to fix, get her kids back. And I think a lot of people forget 3 of her children are adults. Therefore, they are going to see the things that people say about their mum on the internet. And just imagine that were you for a second. How would you feel? Because I know for a fact if there were anybody saying anything bad about my mum on the internet, game over. So I think it's a bit bold of people, certain people, to be doing that. And interestingly, again, Katie then finds a photo of her younger self, even younger than the 2000s, and she was about between the ages of 5 and 8 in these photos, I would assume. And she says that she looks beautiful. She says, I see a really pretty young girl there. So what I want to know is what happened between the age of around 5 or 8 to the age of about 18 that made her basically do a whole 180 and change everything. What we do know is that her biological dad wasn't involved when she was younger. He upped and left. But there are so many cases of dads not being involved with their kids throughout their childhood specifically. So there must be something else. Katie was about 3 or 4 when her dad left. He was a builder, so he wasn't around much anyway. I'm sure it's common knowledge. It is obviously best to have both parents there. It is more stable. Things are often easier to deal with. And it makes me wonder if her dad was still around and he didn't basically just see you later, bye Felicia, would she have had this career that she's had? Would she have gone down this path? And it's sad because she says, I remember going around to my friends' houses and seeing, you know, a mum and a dad there and thinking, oh, so this is a family. This is what families are supposed to be like. And I can definitely relate to that because I had parents who didn't live together, weren't together growing up, and it's common, it's very common. It don't make it easier, and I don't think you really think about it too much when you're really young, but as you kind of get older, for me personally, it was like the end of primary school, and I started to think, well, why is it different here to other people's houses? But in the long run, I don't feel like it's had a massive effect on me. I still see both of my parents. I love both of my parents. I don't blame any of them. And from what I've seen, Katie is in that same mindset. In 1988, Katie's mum, Amy, then went on to marry a man named Paul. He was 25. Katie was about 11 then. But Paul has gone on to say the reason that he wasn't so affectionate towards her was because he didn't want her to feel like she was obligated to give him cuddles and things like that and go to him and talk to him about certain things. And I do understand that, especially if it's not biologically your child, you are a little more cautious, I'd imagine. You don't really want to overstep. And maybe that's the wrong kind of attitude to have and the way to see it, but it probably is safer because it's, in my head anyway, in my opinion, it's better to be that way than to be overstepping in any way and have them uncomfortable with you. So now I'm going to get into the main part of my opinions. Katie's mum, in the first episode of this documentary, went on to say that when she was about 14 years old, when Katie was 14 years old, it was Paul's 30th. So that is Katie's stepdad. So Katie is 14 years old. She walks into Paul's 30th birthday dressed in leather. Katie's mum, Amy, then tells the camera crew and people interviewing and, you know, the whole crew, that all the boys and all the men turned their heads and were staring at her. And then someone said to Amy that she's going to be trouble. Now, this is the first issue I have, because what do you mean when you say that? She's 14 years old. You as a boy or a man should not be even looking at a 14-year-old girl in that way. You know her age and that's enough. Don't even look at her. Children, which is what Katie was, do things for attention sometimes. It's your job as an adult to know better. To not give her what she's looking for. Because that makes you a predator. 2 years later, Kate is now 16 and she was now leaving high school. She hadn't sat all her GCSEs, so she didn't get them all. But all through high school, she was expelled, kicked out of class, detentions, very rebellious. And part of me thinks, is that because she didn't have her dad in her life and she had a stepdad instead, who has admitted that he wasn't very hands-on. He kind of sat back and let her come to him if she wanted to. People used to say to her, you're going to get nowhere basically because you haven't got your GCSEs and you haven't worked hard in school. And she used to stand in front of the mirror posing and say, why do I need all this if I'm going to be famous? I'm going to be a superstar. I do love her all or nothing thinking, but at the same time, and maybe this is me being an adult now, it is obviously best to have some kind of education, have finished some kind of education, because if things didn't go to plan for her, then she would have had something to fall back onto. And it makes me wonder, has all of this happened because she didn't have anything to fall back onto? Has she constantly chased this fame and done everything she can to guarantee that she will always make headlines because she knows that she hasn't got any other qualifications, and because of that she wouldn't be able to get a normal job? But just jumping back a little bit as to why she is the way she is, it could either be that she didn't have a dad in her life, her biological dad in her life. But if you don't know, there is another reason it could be, and that is because when she was about 7 years old, she was in a park. She was with a friend in the park and there was like a cut through. She was walking through there and there was a man who was trying to get her to do things to him, and he tried to do things to her. Naturally, that is going to be traumatic. She was 7 years old. That is a child. That is a baby. And I don't know about you, but I didn't even know that about her before I'd seen this first episode. And it really makes my skin crawl. No one should have to go through that, and I think that's why I've got a little bit more compassion for her now. Even more than I did before. Sorry if that's a bad thing, but I just do. No, it doesn't justify the things that she's done, like I have to keep saying, because some people just aren't understanding. But it's now 30 years later and she still remembers the fine details. You're not going to move on from something like that. She still remembers the police coming and talking to her and having to take her underwear for inspection. Evidence. And that also makes me wonder, is this another reason that her family were more lenient with what she wanted to do? You know, when she went to her mum and told her that she's going to be doing page 3, her mum obviously wasn't happy about it, but she didn't stop her. And I always wondered, why didn't she stop her? As a mum, I'd want to stop her. With her being so young, she could be taken advantage of by the people that she's supposed to be working for. There's many different reasons to it. And I always thought, why didn't her mum do more? But this would explain why she didn't. Her mum might have known or had that feeling, or she might have even told her that it's just empowering. It is empowering if she's been through something like that. Being able to be topless, have photos taken of you and then published in newspapers or magazines, and have people see these photos, want you, but not be able to touch you, is very empowering, I'd imagine. She's always said that it's a power thing. Having men look at her, but not be able to touch her, not be able to have her. And to an extent, I get that, I understand that. But for me personally, that is not the route I'd want to go down, just because that'd make me feel very, very extremely uncomfortable. But me and Katie Price obviously aren't the same person. So in 1995 is when it really started to take off. She's claimed she's always been in nightclubs, always looking at people, giving them the eyes. And that's when she said it's a power thing. She used to love it. So her first boyfriend, Gary Bolingbroke, he was an electrician. He was basically at a nightclub the same time Katie Price was after a game of football, where he then saw a group of men surrounding Katie Price, harassing her. So what does he do? He went over and basically told them all to see you later. Basically told them all to go away, stop harassing her, stop bothering her. And this is where it all began. He asked Katie who she was, and when she said her name, he was like, oh, I know your dad. You know, meaning Paul. And I'm under the impression that Paul wasn't too happy about that, because yes, he knew Gary because he was a semi-pro footballer, but he obviously knew the kind of man he was, and you know, they were always chatting girls up and things like that, and he probably thought, you know, I don't really want you around my stepdaughter. But I'd imagine if he voiced his opinions on it, Katie wouldn't listen anywhere. Katie was a receptionist at a place in Brighton, and all she wanted to be was a superstar, a pop star, something like that. She wanted to be famous. She wanted all the eyes on her, all the attention on her. So naturally, a receptionist isn't going to be her chosen career path. She wanted to be a catwalk model originally, but if you know anything about catwalk models, you know you need to be tall, which Katie wasn't. She wasn't tall enough. There was a woman called Jackie where she worked, and Jackie is the woman who said to her, you don't need to be tall to do glamour modelling, which, as we know, is the start of Jordan. Katie and Jackie then went down to a beach, Brighton Beach specifically, where Jordan, Katie Price, whichever alter ego you want to go by, Jackie and Katie then took photos in that office, and then went on to go down to Brighton Beach, where Katie was wearing just a red thong, and take photos there. There were nobody about, apparently, no children, thank God. And this was all on Katie Price's lunch break, mind you. All on a lunch break. It always baffles me that, because I just think, how are you getting all of these things done in a 1 hour lunch break? Maybe time acted differently back then. So these photos that were taken on the beach were then sent to an agency, and straight away they liked what they saw. They took her on, and then Katie was then in a position where she needed to tell her mum exactly what her job career was going to be. And when she first told her mum, Amy, she said, no way, you're not doing that, because I know what that means. And she said, don't you think glamour can still be glamour without getting your boobs out? When the interviewer asked Amy if she wanted Katie to go down that route, she said, would you imagine that for your daughter? No, of course not. But what she wants, she'll get under any circumstances. And as we know, Katie went ahead and did this. Made this her career. And I think the reason that she did this is because she craved that attention. And she needed that validation from men, but why? Because it's interesting that it's gone this way for Katie when so many other people have similar or the same circumstances as what she grew up in, but didn't go down the same route. Katie has always been so impulsive. She doesn't really think about the things that she's doing for enough time, and she definitely doesn't see how it's going to affect people. She tends to deal with the aftermath after the fact. So in 1996, someone hadn't turned up for a page 3 photo shoot. Page 3 was basically the third page in a newspaper where they would feature naked women. And by naked, I mean fully naked sometimes. I'm sure I remember being young and seeing a little too much. And looking back, it's absolutely mental to me how this was allowed, how people thought this was a good idea, how others accepted it, how the public just accepted it. Oh yeah, that's normal, we'll just have a naked girl on the third page of a newspaper. It could be my 7-year-old child reading this, but it doesn't matter. Weird. So she was doing this for the Sun newspaper, but they didn't want to use her actual name. Now, there could be many reasons for this, but I'd say just to protect her a little bit. Obviously, everybody knew her name, but I feel like putting these photos up of her under a different name separates her Jordan persona from Katie Price. And I feel like they might have done that to give her a little bit more privacy and have people kind of respect her as, yes, being a page 3 model, but also being her own person and requiring boundaries. So they went through many different names, Emily, Jane, things like that. And none of them seemed to fit her. I mean, Emily and Jane, definitely not. I feel like they're too innocent. So Jordan did her first page 3 shoot on Friday the 20th of September 1996. And let's just say her family weren't happy. Her brother Dan was mortified, I'd imagine. He just thought, all my friends are going to see my sister's boobs in this newspaper. Why does she need to get her boobs out? He thought it was disrespectful, wrong. And I'd imagine he didn't want his friends looking at his sister in that way. Never mind random strange men. In this first episode, her mum did say, I can still feel the way that I felt when I first saw that. And she just kept saying, why? What possessed her? What made her want to do that? But again, it comes down to that first rejection. She couldn't do catwalk modelling because she wasn't tall enough, so what did she do? She had to compromise and be a glamour model. That wasn't her first choice. She just wanted to be a model, a superstar, everyone to know her name and know her face. And again, it shows how little she thinks about herself, because if she's willing to literally do anything just for the attention and the validation, then I think it says a lot about her mental state and, you know, her mental health. And Gary Bolingbroke, who was obviously Katie's partner at the time, he used to play semi-pro football, and he would have his practice sessions, whatever, train on a Saturday. Katie's first page 3 appearance was on the Friday. So when Gary went into football training on Saturday, the next day, he walks into the changing rooms where someone had stuck a photo of Katie in her page 3 attire, if any. The page 3 photo on every single peg that was in that changing room. And obviously, they'll have been doing it as if to say, oh, look at your girlfriend, she's in page 3. But obviously, you and me both know if you are in a relationship with someone, the last thing you want is for everybody to see what they look like naked, or even barely dressed. And with page 3 being a massive part of 90s culture, naturally, everybody did see. Every man bought them. And that's because newspapers were the primary source of information for people. There was no social media. There wasn't Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, X, TikTok and other things that we have these days. It was just newspapers and magazines. Newspapers and paparazzi controlled everything. The media controlled everything. 45 million copies were sold per day. And paparazzi were very different to how they are now. There are a lot more laws around it, I think. I'm not sure if they are actual laws. But back when Jordan was a thing, paparazzi would literally hide in her shed. They would do surveillance to get these photos. And now they have to be so careful about not overstepping and giving them the privacy that they need. Even though 9 times out of 10 they do not do that anyway. They are not there to be respectful of their privacy. They're there to get photos to then sell. And nothing could be done about it back then. They'd hide in sheds, they'd invade people's privacy, and it'd just be accepted because they needed to see the photos. They needed to see what Jordan was up to. And then in comes Jeannie Savage, also known as Jeannie fucking Savage. And she had this nickname because she swore loads, and apparently still does. And I don't know about anyone else, but I find that quite unprofessional. I think especially if you're going to be working in the entertainment industry, swearing, you should kind of get your swearing under control, because a lot of the time you are going to be in contact with many different people throughout your day. And I often take someone swearing, even though I swear a lot myself, I often take other people swearing a lot as kind of a reason to stay away from them. I feel like, oh, are you okay? I want to say intimidating, but it's not really intimidating, it's more just, I don't know if we'll be a good mix. So Jeannie Savage was one of the most famous glamour model photographers. She photographed everybody for Page 3. And she definitely knew what men wanted to see in those Page 3 photos. And because of this, when she actually first met Katie Price, she wasn't very nice. For example, she didn't like her nails, so she was like, I fucking hate them, you need to change them. Oh, what's going on with your hair? Things like that. Very picking you apart. And it's said that everyone was scared of her because of how confident and forward she was. And I fully can relate to that. I feel like I would be the same. I'd be like, hun, is it necessary? She hated what Katie were wearing when she first met her. She thought it was too much and it needed to be massively toned down. So she asked her to change her nails, obviously get rid of the clothes, and she wanted her eyes to be more natural. So I guess Katie was quite heavy with the eye makeup around that time, and Jeannie wanted something completely natural on the eyes. And this is another, this is playing more into what men want, I guess, because 9 times out of 10, if you ask a man which he prefers and you showed him a photo of full eye makeup or even some eye makeup and no eye makeup, they probably would choose the no eye makeup. But these are probably the same men that think no makeup is literally no makeup. No, hun, we still spend hours doing that. So Jeannie suggested to the Sun newspaper that they feature Katie. So they went to a studio, took the photos, sent them off, and she was featured. Katie waited for that phone call to say that Jeannie wanted to book her, and when it came, Katie was then seeing Jeannie about 2 times a week, which is probably very successful, no? Well, because I don't know model work and things like that, but I'd imagine being busy 2 times a week is very good, especially seeing as she'd only just started. Jeannie has said in this documentary that she was golden, a young man's dream. And it's a bit strange to me because this was in 1996 and obviously Katie was only 18 then, and I just think, is it weird? Or is, obviously back then it was normal, it wasn't anything sinister. It was, people didn't look at this situation and think, she's being taken advantage of or she's too young. And it just honestly doesn't sit right with me. I'm not going to lie, because what do you mean? What do you mean she's a young man's dream? I know it was obviously accepted more back then, or just not seen as much of a problem, but Katie was only 18 at this time. It was 1996. She was born in 1978. So what, 18 years old, and you sat there publishing her in newspapers as a Page 3 model and then going on to say that she is a young man's dream. You have all these men turning their heads and saying, oh, she's going to be a problem at the age of 14. The more that I watch, the more that I understand why Katie is the way she is. I think we probably all would be. Most of us would be if we had to experience and go through the things that she's gone through. Yes, many, many, many millions of people go through worse, but that shouldn't shrink what's happened to Katie and what she's gone through and the way she is from this. Katie's already said she knows she's not the prettiest person in the world. She knows she's not the best looking, but she's very photogenic, and that is what's made her so successful. She's publicised every single moment of her life and made money off things she probably shouldn't have, yes. But it's her life. Nobody is anybody to tell her that she can't do that. You can have your opinions, just like I do, but we're not entitled to tell her what to do with her life. Nobody is. She's always said she knows how to work the camera. There's something in her eyes, and when a camera's in front of her, it's like she turns into an animal. And I feel like that's very representative of her Jordan alter ego. That is very much animalistic. One thing about Katie Price that I've always recognised is that she is very, very confident through her eyes. She talks a lot through her eyes. So I fully agree with what she says there. And again, she said it's all a part of going against men. They can look at her as much as they like, but they can't get near her, they can't touch her. She wanted people to want her, but she knew that they could never get anywhere close to her. And I guess this page 3 work was where it all really took off, because from then she was able to buy her own house, her own car, but it still wasn't enough. She was always chasing that next step, that next milestone. What else can I do? What other controversies can I cause? What will happen if I just drop this here? How much attention can I get? She craved the fame and the attention so much that she would literally do anything. Gary Bolingbroke has actually said when she turns into Jordan, she turns into a completely different person. And yeah, she's likely to, because Jordan is her alter ego. She is channeling that animalistic side of her. But he did say when she used to go on holidays, she would lay out completely naked, only have a little piece of fabric covering her downstairs area, which I don't agree with. If you're going on holiday, there are going to be kids there, like Gary has said in this first episode. And for me, that's just, you shouldn't be doing that. Obviously, you shouldn't be doing that. Be fully clothed, fully acceptably clothed. I'm not saying wear a whole outfit, but a bikini would have been better than absolutely nothing. Katie's reasoning for this was obviously because she was a page 3 model. She couldn't be having tan lines in them photos, honey. It does make me wonder though, was editing a thing back then? Because surely they would have been able to edit that. Then again though, if Photoshop wasn't a thing, which is probably the app you need to use these days, then it's not likely to have been possible. But I just think, you know, come on now, tan lines, you're going to get rid of your morals for a second just to get rid of tan lines. And it's not like she didn't know kids were there. She knew kids were there, she just didn't care. So that is one thing that I will say, you know, I don't agree with, obviously. So on this specific holiday, I think it was in Gran Canaria in 1996, she ended up getting kicked out of the hotel because she refused to dress appropriately. And I think this is where Gary started to have a few doubts about who he was with. But I think the main reason was the fact that when people were talking about them, it went from Katie being Gary's girlfriend, but quickly changed to Gary being Katie Price's boyfriend. And Gary has actually said that this is what made him think this isn't going to last. And it baffles me that, because I just think, why have you suddenly changed your mind about this relationship? Why do you now suddenly feel that it's not going to work because people recognise your girlfriend more than you? I think that says a lot about his ego. And I feel like it's possibly because he didn't want people to see his girlfriend doing better than him. But again, that's an ego. I think that's a you problem. Sorry, Gaz. In Katie's mind, at this point, they were already over. There was just too much that were happening. He'd changed too much, in her words. They were already over, so there were obviously things happening. And this is when she decided to cheat with Teddy Sheringham. So he was a football player. Katie went to meet him in a hotel. No sexual encounters occurred. But even then, paparazzi are going to take photos, aren't they? People are going to think, people are going to assume. So Katie had met Teddy in a hotel. The next day, that is all over the front of newspapers. And who saw it? Gary, of course. So he marched around to Katie's mum's house, whilst Katie's mum and her husband were in bed, by the way. Barged his way in and started asking what this is in the papers. Started kicking off. After that explosive entry, I guess he calmed down and left. And then from then, his phone, he said, was like a Christmas tree, just ringing all the time from different newspapers wanting his side of the story. And that's when he decided he just wanted out. He just didn't want to deal with this. And I understand that. We can't hate him for that, we can't slag him off for that. He chose peace. But from this point, Katie knew that she could manipulate the media to her advantage. And I guess that's what she's done ever since. She realised that the more controversy that she created, the more relevant she would stay. She's publicised her entire life, like I've already said, and, you know, done things that many people would consider immoral, which is interesting because for this 4-part documentary that she's done, she has actually signed away editorial control and allowed Louis Theroux's production company, Mindhouse, to interview everyone and anyone that has ever known her. She said, anyone who has ever known me, I give you permission to go and interview them. I don't care who it is. I don't care what ex it is. Anybody. So is it because she really does have nothing to hide? Or is it her attempt at trying to gain public sympathy after all the scandals that have happened over the last few years? Now, moving on to her iconic boobs. Despite all the page 3 models being silicone free, according to her brother Dan, Katie still wanted this boob job. She felt this was really something that would skyrocket her career, really make it take off. And so she went to a surgeon who gave her 430cc breast implants. Katie said as soon as she had, had the surgery and seen them, she knew instantly she wanted to be bigger. She knew it just wasn't enough. It wasn't big enough. But before this, everyone had been trying to put her off getting them. No one thought it were a good idea. The Sun actually put a poll up asking viewers what they think she should do, whether she should have the surgery or not have the surgery. 80% said no, don't do it. But Katie, being the impulsive character that she is, of course went ahead. And after her second boob job, that's when everything did take off. She was in all the men's magazines, but she said even with all this success, she still was just missing something. And of course, that was love. And this is where Dane Bowers comes in. They were both at a Wild Wild West premiere when they met. They got talking there and they just clicked. Katie said it was just amazing and kind of instant, and they had a lot of chemistry. Dane admitted to being a boob man, which is probably why he was so attracted to her to start with. Apparently they used to sit in Katie's car and listen to music together that, Dane had released, because of course he's a singer. I don't think I've mentioned that yet, sorry, he's a singer. As a little bit of time went on, Dane just wasn't comfortable with Katie being topless in these photos, doing page 3 things. And for probably the first time in her life, Katie actually listened and started to be less topless, started to cover up. But then Katie started to notice that when he was doing these performances, which obviously he was going to do because he's a performer, he's a singer, he's in, a group, she was noticing that he was quite flirtatious, shall we say, when it came to performing. There were no kind of issues when it came to him performing with Victoria Beckham, for example, who was quite close to him and quite flirtatious in performances, whilst they were singing, of course. Victoria Beckham, for those of you who don't know her, was part of the girl group in the 90s, Spice Girls, and she was also a singer by herself, I believe. She's now more commonly known as David Beckham's wife. So, in a nutshell, Katie wasn't happy that he could be all close and personal to Victoria on the stage, but when it came to her doing topless work, topless shoots, he wasn't happy with that and she wasn't allowed to do it. So a little while after that, Katie gets a phone call from her agent, who is, as we know, Jeannie Savage, asking if she wanted to do a calendar. And, it's Katie, she's not going to turn down the opportunity. So she chose to do it and deal with the consequences after. But Dane had already told her that if she does this, they'd be over. No chance. But as I've told you before, and as you will know if you know anything about Katie Price, she's very impulsive. Whatever she wants, she will get under any circumstances. So she did this calendar, and as soon as them photos were released, Dane broke up with her. That was it, no more. Ghosted her before ghosted was a thing. Cut off contact, didn't want to know. Katie was absolutely beside herself and decided that the only thing she could think to do was to take a load of pills. She has said that this was a massive cry for help. It was just a way at trying to get back at Dane. And I know a lot of people might be like, well, that feels quite manipulative and just evil. Well, it isn't. Because when you're in that kind of relationship and you are young, she was only 21, I think people are forgetting that. But when when you're that head over heels in love with someone, you can, it's unbelievable, some of the things that you think about now, some of the things that you end up doing or thinking or saying that you wouldn't normally do. Dane's brother phoned Katie's mum and told her she was in hospital, told her she tried to, and Katie's mum went to see her, but in the meantime Dane was there with her, and as soon as all Katie's friends and family arrived, Dane left. I guess he was there because he still cared about her. Obviously, when it comes to something life or death, all bad feelings you may have for that person kind of get put to the side, and you focus on what's important. But after this, and after she got out of hospital, he just still wasn't interested. Still didn't want to know. Her mum has said when she's unhappy, she changes parts of her body. You know, other people might change the hair colour, the style of makeup, the eyeshadow colour, the clothing. Katie changes her body. She'll have surgical procedures. And I think a little bit of that stems from needing control over something. If she is unable to control Dane, for example, and what he's doing, then what can she do? She can go have something done to her body. She can go have work done to her body. That is in her control. It's her. That is something she does have power over. So that's why she had more breast surgery. Then, fast forward a year later, and this is when she meets Dwight. And if you don't know who Dwight is, it's Dwight Yorke, this guy. He is also Harvey's dad, who is Katie's eldest son. She didn't love Dwight. It was purely to make Dane jealous. She says in this documentary that she felt like a bunny boiler because after all of this that had happened so far, he still wasn't interested. So one day, Katie saw Dane's bedroom light on and she assumed that he had a woman in there. She thought he was seeing this other model. I don't know who she thought he was seeing because that hasn't been discussed. But she said she thought it were another model. So she saw his bedroom light on and she still had his key. So she let herself in with the intention of going up to the bedroom, barging her way in and being like, what are you doing? Even though they weren't together, so, you know, you can't really do that, hun. But, you know, bunny boiler, yeah? So she let herself into his house, went up the stairs, and no one was there. No one was in the house at all. And seeing as Katie Price is a Gemini, revenge is her best friend. Revenge is something she is well versed in and loves. And I quote, "I'm a Gemini. Revenge is... I love it." And what was her revenge, you might ask? Well, Dane was a big shoe lover. Not a big shoe lover, like he loved shoes massively. He owned many TNs, which are a type of shoe, of course. And Katie decided that the best form of revenge for this man would be to remove every single right shoe to every single pair of shoes that he owned. Now, I'm not going to encourage this, but if there ever was someone in your life that you must get revenge on, I think that's probably the best one. Harmless, but enough to hurt him. I like that. Katie believes the best revenge is success, which is why she kept pushing for that next milestone, that next level. She went on to aspire to being one of the Playboy bunnies. But with all the success also came a lot of chaos and ugly things, which is what we're about to find out in part 2.